keep it on for the duration of the meeting. Staff, if you are able, please activate your video when you are speaking. As the chair mentioned, all panelists, that is alders, commission members, and staff now have the ability to mute and unmute themselves. Commission members, please continue to use the raise hand feature when you'd like to be recognized to speak, ask questions, or request a roll call vote. Lowering your hand will take you out of the queue. Members of the public who have registered to speak, the name you entered in Zoom must match the name you entered in registration. You will remain muted until called upon. The clerk will tell you when your time is up. After speaking, a member of the body may ask you a question. If you need to share documentation with the body, please send it to the email listed on today's agenda. Chair, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Joe. Patrick, if you could call the roll, please.
Sure. Chris McCahill.
Here.
Ankovich.
Here.
Jessica is not. Bill Bremer.
Here.
Okay. And Ken Strite.
Here.
Okay. Bridget Brown. Not present. Grant Foster.
Here.
Mike Tierney. Not. Harold Cleames.
Present.
That.
Okay, thank you. Did everybody have an opportunity to look at the minutes from last time? And we're going to, again, allow you to mute and unmute yourselves. So just go ahead and speak up if anyone has a motion, or you can raise your hand as well if you prefer. Ken makes a motion to approve. Is there a second? Okay, second by Bill. Any comments? Additional discussion? Okay, if there are no objections to a unanimous vote, we'll record that for the record. If you have any objection, please raise your hand. Okay. Thanks, everybody. Joe, we don't have any public comment, or Patrick, correct?
None.
Okay. Any disclosures and recusals this evening? I don't see any raised hands. Okay. We have some commission business that Ken suggested we put on the agenda, and it's something that I've been having some conversations with staff and someone from the Transportation Policy and Planning Board as well. And that relates to how can we view every agenda item through the lens of equity, diversity, and inclusion. The mayor's office has been working really hard to help add diversity to the Transportation Commission and to fill all the positions with members who provide the expertise as detailed in the ordinance. Our ordinance is very, very detailed about what kind of expertise we would like to see on the commission and how much diversity we would like to see. For example, since we lost Carl, we don't have anyone with exact expertise on transportation issues for people with disabilities, just an example. We all recognize it can be difficult to find that appropriate balance of equity, diversity, and inclusion. Staff works really hard. I want to give them a shout out to perform appropriate community outreach and to bring forward that feedback. We publish our agendas to try and get people to come, but what can we as members do to try and provide that appropriate balance of equity, diversity, and inclusion? So I'm going to throw it open to the floor. I don't know, Ken, if you had any comments that you wanted to make, since this was something that I know is high on your list of topics that you thought it was important for us to discuss.
Well, I think, it's always been important, I think, to all of us, and I think especially since May, and the issue of just sort of how do we sort of, my role on the commission is usually sort of the generic fungible all transportation person kind of thing. And other people sort of are on, and they have a background which sort of represents one issue or another. And I think we just need to be really careful every time when we're thinking about this. I know we do it a lot when we're talking about Metro and the scheduling and the difficulty, because for most people, or for a lot of Madison, people of color live more on the rims of the wheel rather than on the spokes or on the hub of the wheel. And so we talk about that. But I think in all issues, we just can't wait to have sort of that designated person sitting on our committee to raise that issue. We all sort of just have to always think about that and bring that up. And especially with Carl on disability. And I too echo your comment, Dan, that staff does do a good job of it, but I think we always have to sort of temporarily put on another hat as we're voting on different agenda items.
Yeah. So we really put this on the agenda, not as just as a discussion topic and as an introduction to something that we may want to talk about further, because it is very hard to find an appropriate balance. And I was involved in a small group meeting on, if we can't get that diversity on our commission, what can we do to try and help represent all of the various areas of the community that may or may not feel comfortable coming to the Transportation Commission, or know how to do it. So other thoughts that people have, or Yang, did you have any other thoughts? Because I know you were involved in that meeting as well. Tom Lynch, you were involved as well. Anybody else on the commission have any other ideas? It's a great reminder that we all try and think about all of the various stakeholders that we should be thinking of as we consider the issues. And I know everybody is always trying to do that. So we can go ahead, Yang.
Yeah, it's a challenge for many city, basically all the city committees, not just our commission. And I think we'll try our best to improve that. I think we need a collaboration from everybody here to do that. From staff, we have been actually looking out for folks that we know might be suitable for to serve on the commission and bring in a lot of different values from different perspectives. And we're making recommendations to the mayor's office. I believe the mayor's office is also heavily involved, looking for folks. It's a priority for them as well. But I think we need also all the members to help on that. Also, I think as a commission, really look at the issues from all different perspectives.
Yeah, so. And I think we get great help from the alders in the city as well, because they know their constituents and they can reach out. As Alder Evers is on with us, and he's doing a great job with regard to Cedar Street and Park Street. So all of those, I take. I think that if we can use all of these resources, if we're unsuccessful in getting folks on our commission, we do the work on the outreach. Chris, go ahead.
Yeah, I think I agree with the notion that sort of until, everyone's fully represented on this body, that, it's up to all of us to be thinking constantly about how different folks are impacted And I think that puts particular onus on us in our own time to understand those issues better. But in terms of getting more folks involved in volunteering for things like this, I think this came up at TPBB when we decided to move to 2 meetings a month instead of 1. The mayor at the time expressed some concern that 2 meetings a month was too much for some folks to take on. But the flip side of that is that the meetings tend to go long if there aren't enough of them. But in any case, I think many of us have the luxury of being able to fit in these meetings, and life goes on around us. And I think recognizing that there is some benefit to keeping things as efficient and short as possible makes it easier for people to participate. So if we have meetings that often go very long into the night, I think that makes it harder to get folks involved that have, childcare needs and other things that get in the way.
Yeah, that's great. The consent agenda, Natalie had suggested we consider that, and we aren't using it tonight, but that's been very helpful. So any other suggestions that people have along the way to help us make the meetings more efficient are appreciated. And, any other thoughts from people with regard to this topic? It's something that, we certainly will continue to discuss as we look at various issues, but just a great reminder. Any other thoughts from people before we move on to the rest of the agenda? Okay, well, Ken, thanks for the suggestion to put it on the agenda, and we'll keep that topic top of mind as we look at all of our agenda items. Okay, we don't have a consent agenda this evening. Item number 2, Sabrina, proposal on with regard to parking meters.
Hi, good evening. I'm going to do a quick screen share here just to bring up that list for folks. All right, and if I need to zoom in at all, please let me know. I think I've got it hopefully zoomed in so folks can see it pretty well. So through the process, we're moving forward with the phase 2 of the meter project, and that's replacing the multi-space meters. The first phase was replacement of all of the single space coin meters, and our multi-space system is reaching end of life and is in desperate need of replacement as soon as possible. So we're finalizing the order quantities, actually plan to issue a purchase order for those replacement meters this week, with installation, depending on timing of shipment, of estimated 8 to 12 weeks, but I know with some of the impacts on supply chain, could be a little bit longer, but toward the end of the year, we're hoping to have all of our multi-space system replaced. So through that process, and given we've seen some significant impacts to revenue and demand, we took a look to see if there are any locations where we want to delay or either temporarily remove meters or permanently remove those. So the single space meters and really any networked meter that's going to accept credit card payments will have monthly cellular data fees. So for just those monthly kind of a fixed fee is $5.75 per month per meter. So we wanted to take a look and see, are we actually losing money by having meters in operation at any locations, and did an analysis of all of our on-street spaces and revenues, both prior to COVID-19 and then looking here just at the last 2 months. And this was the list we identified that generally have pretty low revenue, where we would be looking for potentially permanent removal. Some would likely return back into service, but so for instance, Railroad Street, 43 cents per space per month is the revenue when we average it for that block. So clearly we're losing significant revenue just by having those meters in service. And it would make a lot more sense to just have posted time limit restrictions rather than having meters that have a operating cost related to them just to have them in service. Certainly that cost also doesn't include, snow removal and other fuel for collectors to get out to those locations for collections, etc. So these are the locations that we're proposing to relocate the existing single space meters. These would then be relocated prior to the new shipment coming in to high demand multi-space meter locations to get those replacements completed. And then signed with various time limit restrictions as needed. And we'd be looking at those kind of on a block by block basis, and if there are any specific needs of those locations related to time limit or other types of restrictions that would need to go in place. So I think that really well summarizes it. Also, one thing I'll add is by doing that and delaying purchases of these spaces is about a $60,000 cost savings, at least in the near term, just on the purchase for those about 110 parking meters. So we can save that $60,000 expense now while these aren't operating at positive revenue, and wait to purchase those in locations where we'd want to return it to metered parking at a later time. So some of those locations, potentially Monroe, Atwood, Dayton, some of the areas here where you're seeing are typically above the threshold of about $23 per space per month on average, when we're averaging or including the sort of monthly depreciation costs as well as the monthly fees. So I think with that, I'll take any questions folks may have, and Bill Putnam is also on the line here to help answer questions.
Okay, questions from anybody? Otherwise, eventually we will need a motion to approve this change. So questions from people? Grant, go ahead.
Thank you. So for the ones that pre-COVID were above the threshold, that seems like it would be logical to want to have them in service, once parking demand kind of reestablishes. What would your process be to sort of reevaluate, or what would the timing that you, obviously we don't know what's happening with COVID yet, but I guess I would just want to make sure there's a solid plan so that we don't sort of take them out and then kind of forget about them. Because I think that we do want to be pricing parking, especially in these areas where we already do see some pretty high demand, like you said, Atwood, Monroe, et cetera. So what's your thinking in terms of when to come back and reassess and perhaps install new ones?
Sure. So just based on the current pace of recovery or lack thereof that we're seeing really in parking demand, we'd be looking at kind of current operations in terms of changes in that, increasing with just downtown and other ones that we're regularly tracking before we'd probably reassess or do studies on these. But those would be based on occupancy studies in those locations. What's the demand if we've got 70% vacancy during peak hours? It would not be appropriate at that time to put meters back in. So we'd be looking for close to that 70-80% occupancy during kind of peak use periods to place those back in. And then certainly we could reassess the revenues that are generated once those are back in. And if they're not generating revenue, those could be again used for replacement meters. If we just find that on a longer term basis, it wouldn't warrant. having meters in and would be better served by time limit. But in terms of timing, kind of a best guess for when we'd be looking at that would be spring of next year to reevaluate and do some occupancy studies. I just don't anticipate there being any significant changes in parking demand and just behavior in general until we see major recovery with the pandemic.
That's helpful, thanks. And so for the other meters that are not on this list that would all be scheduled for or new installations, has the drop in meter revenue been equally significant, or are these really more the outliers where it's really gone down so significantly?
So these are tend to be, so I guess I'll start by saying when we first started getting smart meters with the multi-space, they were installed at our highest demand locations and based on collection route revenue. So we didn't have kind of block by block data, but we knew by collection route which areas had the highest revenue when we had the old coin meters. And so those locations are where we installed multi-space. In collection routes with lower revenues, those were not prioritized and for multi-space, and because they were just in general lower demand, many of those single space areas or the places that remained coin only were due to not typically generating high enough revenues to justify putting a $12,000 piece of equipment on that block. So the single space meters replaced all of those coin only. With that, we now have about a year and a half of data that is specific to the space level, block level, collection routes. We can get a lot of really good data on usage that we were never able to get before. So these are kind of those outlying areas where there were, traditionally coin meters. We didn't have great data other than at the higher level of the entire collection route. So in general, I would say there are significant impacts on these, probably more so than other areas, because they tend to be already outlying or lower demand types of locations. We still have seen an impact, but I know just looking at revenue data, there are some locations that are showing relatively similar revenue data when compared to January and February. So it really is pretty specific to location and what activities are occurring there. But yeah, in general, we've seen declines, but these are more significant.
Great, thank you.
Harold?
Yeah, thank you. We often have discussions here about we have limited right-of-way and there's competing uses for that right-of-way. And what I'm taking away from this data is that demand for car parking space is down. And we have seen some examples where we have the streetery program, for example, where local businesses have used some of that public right-of-way and use it in different ways. And I looked at the map and it might not make sense to think about that because these might not be the right locations for that. But I do want to raise the question. If demand is low, rather than just making these regular time limited spots, which means we don't get any revenue from it and they just turn into regular parking, have we thought about if any of these locations would lend themselves, either the locations themselves or, if we decrease the amount of car parking on the other side of the street, for example, or one block over, then that might also drive up revenue if there were, for example, businesses that would be interested in, streetery or whatever we want to call it.
Sure, that's a good question. I don't know that any of these locations, and Phil could type in, have requested streeteries. So I don't know that there's interest at this time. For those where I think they'd already be in with fees waived for meters, if folks want to create a streetery program at metered spaces, there's currently no cost for businesses to take those spaces out of service. And I think in terms of, parking were removed on one side versus the other, there are some pretty significant differences in some locations where you'll see like 200 Wisconsin, east side, north side, you'll see just one section of the street identified. And those are locations where there is significant difference in revenue, where we've got relatively high, at least sustainable revenues on a different location or across the street, where we're not seeing it on these sides of the block.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, other comments? I don't see any other comments. Oops. Bill?
I'll make a motion for approval of the list as presented.
Okay, there's a motion by Bill. Grant?
I'll second it. I had a comment also.
Okay, so there's a second by Grant, and go ahead and make your comment, Grant.
Thanks. Well, and a quick question, Sabrina. The 2000 Atwood says north side only. Can you just clarify where that one is? Is it actually on Atwood, or is that on the Winnebago side?
Yeah, let me see if I can pull up that map here for you. So here's the location here of the Atwood metered spaces.
Oh, so the ones further back. Okay, thank you. That answers my question.
Okay. Any further discussion? Okay, I'm not seeing any hands. We'll assume a unanimous vote unless anybody would like to raise their hand and ask for a roll call. If not, we'll assume unanimous consent on the motion. Okay, I don't see any hands raised, so thank you, Sabrina. Okay, next item is rather than having formal written reports from the various areas, we decided to do some verbal, operational, and COVID-related updates as they are available from parking, metro, and traffic engineering. So Sabrina, did you want to go first? Did you have any updates for the group related to COVID or any other operational updates other than what you already talked about this evening?
Sure. Not anything. That's the big item that we're working on is getting those meters transitioned and working to replace the multi-space meters as quickly as possible. There's an update on the government east demolition that has begun as of, or more visible demolition. I believe they started removing glass. I noticed as I drove by today. So that demo was slated to begin this week and has started. That's expected to be completed by, I believe, the end of November. Other than that, in terms of COVID and revenues, we've not seen significant changes. Revenues are relatively stable compared with June through to date in August. So no significant changes there. Unfortunately, we have seen quite a bit of interest in continuing to expand, the number of streeteries and curbside pickup locations. The latest number for, at least for meters out of service, related to those were 63 spaces for streeteries. And then we've got 101 curbside pickup locations in place at metered locations. So that continues to be popular, and folks are still requesting those spaces for folks. Other than that, no significant updates for parking.
Hey, anybody have any questions for Sabrina? Okay, Justin, go ahead.
Hi, good evening, everybody. So big things for us are the service restoration, which you all approved in July. That went into effect this past Sunday. For the most part, it went smoothly. We've got a couple little tweaks that we're looking to potentially make, but none that would actually affect the routes, just some tweaking, some timing on some early trips. And then the other big thing is fare collection. As you know, TC approved the restoration of fare collection once we had installed the plexiglass shields to separate the driver from the aisleway. That work is wrapping up. And so we have announced that we'll be going back to charging fares on September 1st, which is a week from today. We got that message out about a week ago. Our ticket window is now open. So far, activity has been pretty light, which is not unexpected. We have had a lot of discussions with the UW as well as MMSD around their pass programs. They're having some issues with distribution of their passes, which is understandable now because a lot of people have been, on site, as well as some of the mail distribution is taking a while. And so we've agreed with them to use university IDs and student IDs as kind of visual validation passes for a short term while until we get all their passes distributed. And that we've set up the fare boxes to where there's a special key for either one for the driver to hit the button so that we can record those rides and reflect that in their billing at a later time. And then we'll talk about later here, but we're planning to move forward with the public hearing for October 14th that we had discussed back in July for the service changes.
Okay, any questions for Justin? Harold, go ahead.
Just a quick question. I heard here that on campus now there are these booster buses where yellow buses are trailing the regular metro buses. Can you say a little bit about how that all works?
Yeah, so the challenge, we're still at a 20-person maximum on the bus. UW it was very concerned about that, which I was as well. We unfortunately don't have the capacity either in buses or people to kind of double up our service through the campus area. And so they've contracted with a company to basically provide school buses that trail our buses around on the campus routes, so that number 80 routes. So far, usage on those has been quite low. Basically, the plan is to people board the metro bus until it's full, and then they are directed to board the school bus that's trailing it. But so far, I think the last I heard, there were just been a couple people that have even boarded the school bus. But that's not terribly surprising because school hasn't really started in earnest yet. So, it remains to be seen here over the next couple of weeks once things kind of fully return to the extent that they are planning to for this fall, and how that is impacted.
Okay, thank you. Maybe a quick follow-up to that. Can you say anything about discussions with public health about that 20-person rider limit? Is that something that's being reconsidered? Because I know, other cities, there's a lot of inconsistency in how different cities around the world handle this.
Yeah. So right now, we're kind of in a holding pattern until we start going back on the reopening ladder. We don't want to kind of depart from any official step in the reopening process at this point. But certainly would take any advice from you all on that. But for now, our plan is to wait until public health moves us to a next phase of reopening before we revisit the passenger limits on the bus.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, go ahead.
Justin, just a question about the driver shields, how that process is going, and do you fully expect to have all the drivers enclosed in the plexiglass by time fair starts in a week?
It's certainly our intent. We have all of the shields in-house now. We have them in the building. We've installed probably about half of them. And we're working hard to make sure the rest are all in place by Tuesday. Unless something goes wrong, we think we're on pace to do that. Things do go wrong occasionally, but fortunately we are outfitting our entire fleet, and so there will be several spare buses that hopefully can be kind of left behind in the garage for the first couple of days if we need to get the shield installed on those buses.
Have the drivers tried them out and are satisfied that it's going to do the job for them?
Yeah, so feedback has been generally good, but I would say there has been a mix. Some folks don't like the feeling of being enclosed. Some folks that, it kind of impedes on their elbow space. These are all things that we knew would exist even before we did this, which is why we went through a pretty exhaustive process to research it and talk to the union about it, because we wanted to make sure that they were telling us that that's what they wanted, knowing the trade-offs that exist. The one thing that I think is more of an issue is that there have been some glare issues with them. The issue is that it's Lexan material, and so the regular anti-glare coatings, I understand, make the material kind of yellow out, kind of turn yellow. And so the manufacturer is working with 3M to alter their anti-glare coating to hopefully provide a solution there that doesn't yellow out the material.
Is that all you had then, Bill? Ken, go ahead.
Justin, is there regular testing of employees? And if so, have there been any positive tests?
We are not doing kind of mandatory testing. Anytime that there is through contact tracing, if there's a person who's come in contact, certainly we encourage them to get tested. To date, we have only had 3 positive tests at Metro. One was a driver fairly early on before I started. And there were 2 drivers, I think probably in June, that were both working together cleaning a bus. And again, we were able to contain that, and it hasn't spread. And since that time, we've implemented new policies to where for the bus cleaning that's being done independently. So, one person at a time on a bus together, on a bus to clean. So, so far, cross our fingers, we have not had any significant outbreaks here at Metro.
Thank you.
Okay, any other comments or questions? Ken, did you have something else or no?
No, I'm trying to lower my hand. Okay.
There you go. I guess I tried to do it at the same time and it went back up again. Okay. Any other comments or questions for Justin? Yang, did you have any updates for the group tonight?
Yeah, sure. Luckily, all our staff are currently doing well. So we're functioning at full capacity at this point. Most of our office staff are working from home, with a few operating mostly from the office. And we have the front desk staff without being physically open to the public, but taking public communications by phone call, email, bags. So all those communication lines still open with the public. And for our shop, all employees are operating from the sales street facilities. So they are doing well. The only restriction we have at this point is that we cannot allow multiple folks in the same vehicle. So that kind of limit our ability to work on some of the bigger projects when we require kind of close correlation of multiple workers. But we're coping along with that. COVID-19, as many of you know, it has a significant impact on our operation in the past few months. So I've been diverting resources, responding to it. For example, the Shared Streets program. And we're actually looking at additional streets to implement as Renee updated the commission last time. So hopefully we can get that going soon. But with all other demands, like managing events and other things, we're short of equipment to do that. We'll see how that goes. And we are heavily involved in the street program. So we're actually the one kind of taking the permit and processing it and working with the businesses on setting those up. And we've been doing timing adjustments for our signal system to make it better, and lots of automatic pedestrian calls so that people don't have to push a button to cross the street. And another area that we spend a lot of time on, I think many of you might be aware as well, is the speed management. With COVID-19, we found that the speeding problem in the city has become worse. And so we receive a lot of complaints and requests on that, with the worst being East Washington Avenue. Speeds are high, and also there's a group of people that use it for a reason. So the high speed recorded was 110 miles per hour. So we are working very closely with the mayor's office and the police department on implementing some enforcement, engineering, and education measures on East Washington Avenue to manage that. So those kind of the few things that we have been spending a lot of time related to COVID-19. But we are also moving forward with all our regular programs. For example, as you have seen, many of the public works construction projects still are moving forward, and then we're working with city engineering staff on all of those. And we are building a couple of traffic signals as approved by the commission. And we are moving along with the traffic calming projects that was approved by the commission early this year. So those are being built right now. We also are moving forward with quite a few pedestrian bicycle improvement projects, which Renee will give an overview today. So those are going to another new thing this year, and thanks to this commission, are the Vision Zero projects. So as we all know, the council adopted a resolution last month, and right now staff are working on logistics to get all those 20 projects implemented. We're looking at doing the first project on East Washington Avenue in September. As we get all the equipment needed and get the paper markings in, working with the vendors, and also get the enforcement support in. So we're probably looking at the second part of September to start East Washington Avenue, and then we'll move from there. We want to cover all those projects this year. And also, we are also, as mentioned, we keep our communication open with the public, and taking care of the daily public complaints requests. So we are, I think, we're in a pretty good spot right now. We're fully functional, and we just hope that the COVID-19 situation will improve, and we can focus more on our regular programs. So that's all I have.
Questions for Yang? Any questions for Yang? I have one for you, Yang. With regard to East Washington Avenue, I had heard that people were complaining because they were having a hard time crossing the street because of the speed limits that you were talking about and some of the racing that was going on. How is that being addressed?
Yeah, we the high speed brought a lot of problems. From the safety of the pedestrians, and also just the outdoor seating by some of the restaurants. When folks sitting out there, sometimes they feel threatened by the vehicles as well, and also to the noise impact of the neighbors. We heard complaints not just from people living on East Washington Avenue, but from people living a few blocks away from it. So it's definitely a real and a serious issue. So we are implementing some engineering measures, including some lane closures on weekend, just trying to narrow down the street, and we deploy some quite a few message boards, and starting from last weekend, we also deployed a couple of speed boards. Previously that wasn't me. I mean message boards. So we've been using a lot of message boards, kind of to educate drivers and ask them to slow down and inform them that enhanced enforcement activities are happening. Mm-hmm. So that we did receive some positive feedback, regarding people feel safer, and also sleep better. Some say that they can now sleep with the window open. But we also heard maybe last weekend, some period last weekend, there's still some issues. So it's probably going to be a long-term project, not just be done in 1 or 2 weekends.
Yeah. Anybody have any other comments or questions for Yang? Okay, thanks. It was a good idea to have those reports so that we can stay current on what's happening. Let's move on to item number 4, which is a presentation on the updates on the redevelopment RFP for the State Street campus parking ramp on Lake Street. So do we have Jeffrey and Tom?
Yes. Good evening. At your last meeting, at the last commission meeting on August 12th, Tom and I presented early draft of the RFP for the replacement of the State Street campus garage. And at that meeting, the commission had a number of comments that you asked us to come back and let you know how we'll be addressing those. There's still a lot of moving parts in the RFP, so we don't have a final draft to present to you at this time. We are still trying to introduce the draft or the RFP on September 15th. But we did write a memo that outlines how we will be addressing some of those concerns. I just want to briefly go through that. I do have one update to the memo regarding the bike center, and that's the first one. So we did reach out to UW staff at the writing of this memo. We had not heard back. This afternoon, actually, I got an email from UW staff indicating that at this time they don't have funds to contribute towards a bike center, but they are interested in having discussions with us to find out what potentially that bike center would look like. So staff will continue to try to have a meeting with them prior to the issuance of the RFP to see if there's anything that we can work out regarding a bike center. The second issue was revolving around whether there should be restrooms in the intercity bus terminal. And what staff is going to do to address those concerns about the restrooms is to provide draft language for having restrooms in the RFP, and also language for no restrooms in the bus terminal. We'll prepare a memo to go along with that. And as it's routed through committees and commissions and ultimately to council, we'll be asking those committees and commissions to weigh in on whether or not there should be restrooms included with the intercity bus terminal. And then ultimately council will make a decision based on that information on which way or what language to include in the RFP when it's released. And then the final point I wanted to mention to the commission is it was mentioned at the last meeting that there were some inconsistencies between sections, and staff will do a thorough review of the RFP prior to introduction to council to clear up any inconsistencies between the sections. And so with that, I'd be happy to take any further questions from the commission.
Bill, go ahead.
Yes, thanks. I appreciate that writing the memo and including regarding the restrooms. Since this is going to be a mixed use development, that there perhaps maybe is the developer could provide opportunities to provide restrooms with if there's eating establishments, or whether it's a sub shop or something like that is nearby the waiting room, that they could share that, or the developer could offer that is a inducement to their proposal to have providing restrooms as part of the with the restaurant or restaurants. Has there been any discussion in the language of with the mixed use of where there might be an opportunity to share?
We haven't had those discussions specifically. It'll be up to the developer to propose what kind of uses, retail or restaurant uses they would propose for the development. So I think those discussions would have to occur once we've selected a developer and in the negotiating of the developer agreement.
Is that all you had, Bill?
Yes, thanks.
Okay. Other comments or questions from the group? I had taken some notes with regard to some of the comments that people made, so maybe I'll just email those to you, Jeffrey and Tom. So
that'd be great.
Yeah, so that you can make sure that you have all those thoughts. Other comments or questions? Otherwise, I'm assuming we'll be on the referral to see it back again.
That would be my assumption.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
Great, thank you.
All right, next we have a discussion about the intersection at University Avenue and Farley. Jim Wolfe, are you on?
Yep, I'm here. Would it be all right if I shared my screen?
Yes, please.
All right. So fairly recently, the commission had approved the geometrics for the pending reconstruction of University Avenue, which is between Shorewood Boulevard and kind of goes through the University Bay and Farley intersection. With that design, the proposed bus stop location was far side at Farley Avenue in a pullout. And after further discussions with Metro and Transportation, there were some concerns about this bus stop location because it would make it difficult for the bus to merge back into traffic and to stay on Campus Drive. So now the preference is to move the bus stop back to its existing location near side at the intersection. There's an existing bus shelter here on an easement in the parking lot. And that presented some opportunities for how to use this space. With the original design, it was kind of a shared bus pullout and bike lane. So we've put together a couple of different options for what to do in this area. Option one would be, so most of the way along University Avenue, the project includes a 7-foot to 8-foot wide sidewalk. So what we can do with the extra space in this area would be to widen that out to 10 feet, bump the curb out to along the rightmost travel lane. And this would allow bicyclists to come off of Farley or continue on the sidewalk along the wide sidewalk here off the street. And then a ramp could be provided into a buffered bike lane onto University Avenue that would connect into the standard bike lane on Old University Avenue. The benefits to doing this is that it shortens this pedestrian crossing of University Avenue, and it actually mimics the length of the crossing on the west side of the intersection. This would save, I think Jerry had mentioned that this would be about 3 seconds on the signal timing, which would be fairly significant and could be given to the University Avenue green time then. It'd also potentially be a little bit more comfortable for cyclists that they won't be mixing with traffic right into the intersection, that they'd actually be getting on the street a little bit away from the intersection into a little bit more protected space in this area. Option two is a little bit simpler option. The bus pullout area could be removed. We could maintain the 8-foot wide sidewalk that was originally proposed, and the buffered bike lane could be extended up to the intersection. More or less mimics the original intent of the design, with having a bike facility on the street to connect into Old University Avenue. But it kind of maintains the longer pedestrian crossing going across University Avenue. So what we're interested in here is to get the commission's thoughts on the preferred option here and how to move forward with design in this kind of southeasterly corner of the intersection of Farley and University.
What do people think? Carl, go ahead.
Maybe not what I think yet, but a question. So with moving the bus stop to the other side of the intersection, would there be a bus priority signal to make that merge easier? I mean, I guess you don't need to merge as much, but I mean, that would still probably still be the advantage because you still have to move one lane over if you want to continue in Campus Drive.
I think Jerry's on. Jerry, would you be able to answer that question?
Go ahead and unmute yourself, Jerry.
I don't think that we had originally planned on installing a transit site signal priority system with this project. I think when BRT comes, that project would be the project that would bring that technology to the signals along this corridor. So I think in short, the answer would be yes, but maybe not with this project.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So preferences, option one, option two. What do you guys think? Grant, go ahead.
I think option one is a better option, particularly for the shorter pedestrian crossing, but I think it also works better for those people that will be biking on the wide sidewalk. Just one, excuse me, one quick detailed suggestion would be to expand the apron at Farley and at the southeast corner ramp, just kind of get it as wide as possible there. Yep. So for northbound Farley, it would transition onto that. Just to make that, make wide of an apron as you can for cyclists to get up onto that. I know there's not a lot of room to work with. There's a signal head there, et cetera, but just doing the most we can.
That makes sense. We can do that.
Is that all you had, Grant?
Yeah, thank you.
Bill, go ahead.
Thanks. Yes, I won't speak to the bicyclists, and I'll leave others to talk about that, the pros and cons. But I really like the shorter ped crossing and making it the same as the other side and giving those 3 seconds to moving more traffic through there. So yeah, I like option one.
Okay. Thank you, Bill. Anybody else? Harold?
Another question, and I mean, I do like the shorter pedestrian crossing distance as well. Do I remember correctly that when there was discussion about having the bus stop on the other side that it is now not on, that there was some talk about needing property acquisition on that corner, or there not being enough space or something like that? Do I remember that wrong?
I don't remember that being part of the discussion.
Okay, then I'm probably misremembering that. That's quite possible.
But you're a fan of option one, Harold?
Yeah, I think that works well. I mean, I think from a bike perspective, the only movement that's not great is if people come southbound on Farley and turn left onto University eastbound. Probably the other option would be better, but I don't think that's a very popular movement because you have to pass on the other side. And so if you want to go onto Old University, you would probably take the path to Highland. And so I don't think that's really a downside of it. And I think really the shortened pedestrian crossing is worth a lot.
Okay, thank you. Ken?
Just real short, I'm in favor of option one.
Okay. Anybody else? I'm a fan of option one myself.
Great, that works out well. That was our preference too.
Okay. Anybody have any other comments? We had a lot of discussion about this intersection when it came back, so it's nice to see these additional options. Right. Any other feedback for Jim and Jerry? Looks like option one is the preference of the group. Okay. Let's move on to Wilson Street. Jim, go ahead.
All right. I've switched plans here now. So this is kind of the preliminary design for the reconstruction of the 300 block of West Wilson and South Broome Street. So the limits here are on Broome Street from John Nolan to Doty Street with the reconstruction with some remarking and bus stop improvements between Doty and Main. And then on Wilson Street from essentially the intersection with Broome Street to North Henry Street. Recently, the Transportation Planning and Policy Board had adopted the Transportation Department's corridor study report on Wilson Street. So the design here is based on the recommendations from that report. I'll kind of go through this block by block for some of the proposed changes and improvements. I'll start on Broome Street. So between John Nolan and Wilson, this is currently 5 travel lanes with pretty narrow terraces on both sides and just a 5-foot sidewalk. So with the project, we would propose to narrow these travel lanes to provide some additional space on the, call it easterly side of Broome, so we could widen out the sidewalk to about 10 to 10.5 feet wide. So this could be more of a shared use path for connection to the Cap City Trail. And then as we get into the Wilson and Broome intersection, back in May of 2019, traffic engineering had done a test of a new lane configuration at this intersection. Currently, the 2 northbound lanes on Broome Street, as they approach the Wilson Street intersection, this right lane has the option to go through or turn right onto Wilson Street. With the project, we would make this a right turn only. As the study done back in May of 2019 showed that would work out reasonably well. We could reconfigure this channelized right turn a little bit, and then we could continue this path, split it into a separate sidewalk, and then continue this as a cycle track onto Wilson Street. There would be a narrowing of the path around an existing tree that we're hoping to save. The cycle track would be narrowed to about 8.5 feet wide around the tree, and then it'll widen out to 10 feet on either side again. The crossing of this channelized right turn would be raised to help slow traffic and also give prioritization to the ped and bike crossing. Bikes and peds could stage here on this island, across Plume Street to another shared path over on this side. So the curb line for this channelized right turn would get reconfigured a little bit. And then for the corridor study, this could continue as a two-way cycle track onto the 400 block of Wilson Street. But reconfiguring that block would be dependent on funding to also reconfigure Bassett Street for the Bassett Street corridor study, as that would involve a lane reduction down to a single travel lane on Wilson Street. Continuing on to 300 block of Wilson Street, we would take this from its current lane configuration, which is 2 inbound travel lanes and 1 outbound travel lane, narrow it down for the majority of the block to just 1 travel lane in either direction, and then have enough space for a 10-foot cycle track at sidewalk elevation. And then as we approach the intersection of Henry and Hamilton, the cycle track would become adjacent to the sidewalk, and we'd widen out the street to provide those dual left turn lanes to continue into downtown. To the other block of Bloom Street, we would narrow the travel lanes, eliminate the other inbound travel lane, which I would drop off for the right turn only. We would have a crossing here that would be more of a mixed space for bicyclists and pedestrians. And then similar to the 300 block of Wilson, we could provide a separate off-street 10-foot wide cycle track, preserving the terrace space between the existing sidewalk and preserving existing trees where they're otherwise not being removed due to health. The cycle track would approach the intersection with Doty Street. Turning radii would be provided for larger vehicles as the retirement community here receives fairly large truck deliveries. The cycle track would then merge to an on-street location since this is beyond the limits of the reconstruction project. And this would be on-street and a floating bus stop would be installed. So the on-street cycle track would approach a pedestrian crossing. This would get raised with essentially a concrete speed hump, raised crossing of the cycle track onto an 8-foot wide bus boarding island on Bloom Street here. So buses could stop here, cyclists could go behind the buses, pedestrians could then cross from the sidewalk onto the island for both boarding and boarding. And then the cycle track would continue up to connect into the bicycle boulevard on West Main Street. Signals. So that was the other big thing. With the intersection of Wilson and Broome, we would also replace the signals with the project. Currently, there's a safety issue with outbound West Wilson left turning vehicles turning left onto southbound Broome Street. That often these left turning vehicles do not yield to eastbound traffic on Wilson Street coming from this direction. So it's been resulted in a number of crashes at the intersection. So with the new signal here, we would split those phases so that westbound Wilson Street and eastbound Wilson Street would have separate green phases with the signal, so we could have more of a protected turning movement here. Additionally, the right turn for inbound Broome to inbound Wilson Street would get signalized with the project. That signal during most times would be flashing yellow, indicating the yield situation for the bike and pedestrian crossing here to always have the right of way. And when eastbound Wilson gets the green, this right turn would also get a red arrow. So if nothing else, during those really high peak times, if it's difficult to get a gap, that would staff these right turns to provide a more protected crossing at the intersection. I think that is most of it in terms of presentation. That was the general overview.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. So I guess the intent here is to get some input on the design from the commission. And then we'd be looking to introduce for a formal geometrics resolution, probably to be taken up by the commission hopefully in mid-September.
Grant, go ahead.
Thanks, and thanks for all the great work on this, Jim. Looks really good. Could you zoom in on the Doty-Broome intersection?
Yep.
I think it's that when you mentioned that you're trying to accommodate for larger trucks because of the retirement community, is that right?
Yes.
And what's the curb to curb on Doty right at the intersection there? Yeah.
I believe Doty is 38 feet wide.
So if they're, I mean, obviously parking can't go right up to the corner anyway. I don't know if it's 10 feet or so. It looks like it's marked yellow, at least on one side. If that were narrowed just at the intersection there, would that help tighten? Would you still be able to accommodate the larger vehicle turnings with a little bit of a shorter crossing?
I had explored that. It's kind of hard to see on here, but I am tightening it a little bit. Part of the problem that we have with the larger trucks is as they're dragging the trailer behind, you know, they kind of have to get into this area with the trailer. So there wasn't much of an opportunity to bump out. You're probably thinking trying to bump out this area here, right?
Mm-hmm, right.
So there wasn't much of an opportunity there to really narrow that down much more.
And in that configuration, is the center line as far north as possible?
Yeah, this is actually, in order to make this turn as it is, those larger trucks, yeah, it's using, so Doty Street right now is marked with kind of a through and left turn lane and then a dedicated right turn lane. And those larger trucks are using pretty much this entire near lane here.
Oh, it's marked with 2 lanes at the intersection right now?
Yeah, right at the intersection it is.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Ken, go ahead.
Remind me, when you get to the intersection at Wilson and Hamilton, so bikes headed uphill, how do they navigate that intersection? I don't know if it's within your dimensions of what you're planning for, but do most of them then go up Hamilton? Is that their destination for the most part? And if so, how do they make that crossing?
There would be a couple of options. So ultimately the cycle track will continue up Wilson Street. But in this situation, if headed east, if there's a red on Wilson Street, again, widen up this ramp as much as possible. And we are planning to put a bike box in front of these 2 turn lanes. So cyclists could come off of the cycle track and then stage in front of the vehicles here to either continue up the hill on Hamilton or make the harder left turn onto Henry Street and then onto the counterflow bike lane on Doty Street. Or alternatively, if there's a green and it's too difficult to merge into traffic, cyclists could come over and then use the signal on Henry Street right here. In the interim, I think the goal would hopefully be to extend this with the East Wilson reconstruction in 2024.
Okay, thank you.
Other comments or questions? Harold, go ahead.
Yeah, for doing comments. So, I mean, I share the concern about Doty Street. And I understand that the restrictions are there, but I mean, that seems like a really dangerous design where you have cyclists and pedestrians in the blind spot of trucks turning there. I know if there were more space, we could do something like a protected intersection where you would move the crossing farther away from the intersection to reduce those blind spots. So I'm not totally sure what the solution here would be. This is in the signal, that's a signalized intersection, right?
Yes.
Okay, so you could have a leading pedestrian / bike interval to at least at the beginning of the phase, give people the space to enter the intersection before turning movements occur, right?
Potentially, we could certainly look into that.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think that would be really important because, yeah, otherwise, I mean, I'm not sure how many trucks there are turning, but in general, that is a problematic movement. But yeah, otherwise, thank you. This looks great. I mean, it has come such a long way, and I think it's really nice now.
Thank you.
Grant.
Thanks. Also, the other thing to consider is moving the stop bar back on the westbound Doty in order to use that space for the large truck turning movements. Obviously, moving the stop bar is not going to ensure that someone stops behind it, but I don't know what the actual volume of those truck turns are, but yeah, I do agree. It just kind of jumps out at me that it's sort of it's sort of a bad angle at the kind of the worst spot in terms of a blind spot, and especially for larger trucks, which are kind of some of the most dangerous in terms of fatalities, just because of hitting folks with the back end. So yeah, I think if just looking at that intersection a little more, and if there's anything else we could do to make that a little bit better, I think that would be the one area for improvement. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, anybody else have any comments or questions for Jim? A lot of great work done here. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
Okay, if not, we'll move on to item number 7. I see that Alder Evers has joined us. My understanding, and I'll let you comment, Alder Evers, is that there was a lot of information provided at the public information meeting, and that the suggestion has been made by you and by engineering to refer the item to the September 16th Transportation Commission meeting, understanding that if you guys decide to go forward with another public information meeting, we may need to refer it forward again. So go ahead, Alder Evers.
Yes, thank you, Chair. There was a really robust discussion, lots of input and concern. And I appreciate that your meeting in July, you purposely referred any recommendation or just final thoughts on this matter until we could have that public information meeting. Staff needs more time, and Sean Malloy from Traffic Engineering can speak to that, to essentially distill what we consider to be the essence of the feedback and the concerns, and what looks to be another alternative that was not previously considered or presented to the neighborhood or presented to you all. So we would probably have to have another public information meeting. We could certainly refer it to the 16th. More likely, we might want to refer it to the October 14th meeting to allow for that public information meeting to be scheduled, to be noticed, to be adequately prepared. However you like to handle it is fine by me.
Sean, I see Sean. Do you want to unmute yourself and comment on the timing there, Sean? I mean, if we refer it to the 16th, we can always refer it again. But if you know now that the 14th is better timing, we can just ask for it to be referred to the 14th. Sean, your thoughts? You go ahead and there you go, Sean.
Oh, all right. I'm unmuted now.
You are.
So staff's preference was to have some time to draw up the other alternative that was discussed by the neighborhood meeting and proposed, and then bring that back to the neighborhood for a public information meeting. So really it depends on how soon we can get our public information meeting. Our thought was to have one in September at some point, maybe mid-September, and then go to the Transportation Commission after we've received feedback from there. We presented 3 options at neighborhood meeting last Thursday, August 20th. They all had options with the diverter island, and recently some of the neighbors from other neighborhoods have asked that there be an option without a diverter island. So that's the option that we're going to be drawing up and presenting to the neighborhoods. So I guess as far as time wise, I think we're going to need to be referred at least 2 meetings, I would think, at least until September.
So our plan at this point, and Alder Carter, I see you've joined us, so you're we're welcome to, we'd love to hear from you as well. We have a meeting on the 16th of September. We have a joint Transportation Commission, Transportation Policy and Planning Board meeting on September 30th. So we weren't planning on having a separate Transportation Commission meeting that night. If we absolutely needed to, we could probably schedule one, before the joint meeting, but it would be easier if we either went with the 16th, which doesn't sound like it would work, or the 14th. But again, we don't want to stand in the way of what's going on. Alder Evers, go ahead.
Yeah, I would recommend that we go with the October 14th meeting. That would allow time for a neighborhood meeting and neighborhood input. In addition to an option without the diverter island, there's also a request to look at a different alignment and regarding Build and Cedar, that the previous 3 options all have the same alignment. I believe Sean's going to be looking at a possible alignment where Cedar would feed into Build would curve around into a 90-degree angle into Park Street, essentially because Build has historically been and currently is a thoroughfare for residents, a true connector for residents on the south side. And there's some concern that if we somehow or another don't take that into account, we will not be doing service to the residents in District 14, who will also be taking full advantage of the grocery store, which again, this is a big part of what we're trying to do here at this intersection.
Alder Carter, did you have any comments?
Yes, I just wanted to say that I also believe that we should take the October date. That gives us plenty time to do the PIM. And the concerns with Bell is that Bell is actually a primary street. It's a priority street. It's a thoroughway, and it would cut off 2 neighborhoods. And I definitely have to protect those 2 neighborhoods because they are the primary users of this grocery store, the existing grocery store, and they will be the primary users of the new store. Thank you.
Okay. Alder Foster, go ahead, Grant.
I would move referral to the October 14th meeting.
Okay, we have a motion to refer to the October 14th meeting. Harold?
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Further discussion? Grant, did I take your hand down? Did you have something else to say? No, okay, thanks. Any further discussion from anybody? I think it's really wonderful that we're giving everybody the opportunity to speak and that all various considerations are being taken into account, and engineering and traffic engineering are looking at the options that can satisfy everybody so that we don't lose any of those connections. And so we can take full advantage of the grocery store that's existing and the new grocery store that's planned. So we'll look forward to seeing it back on October 14th.
Thank you so much. Have a good evening.
We have a motion and a second. Unless I see any hands objecting, we'll assume unanimous consent. Okay, great. Thanks, everybody. So
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thanks. You too. We'll see you back on the 14th.
Sure will.
Okay. We'll put that on our list for October 14th. Okay, Renee and Yang, ped bike enhancement review list.
All right, so I'm gonna share my screen. That's all right.
Sure, go ahead.
All right. Okay, oh, there we go, I'm going too fast. All right, so I'm here to talk about the pedestrian bicycle enhancement program, which many of you are familiar with. But just a quick little review. So it does a variety of different things. Does a lot of projects, particularly arterial collector, but also local streets. It can be ped islands, signage, pavement marking. You know, probably one of the things that it's most known for is the rapid flash beacons that we see at crossings, as well as driver feedback boards, the boards that show people their speed limit. But some of the money also, I just wanted to mention, does need to go for repairs. We have a lot of the RFBs and DFBs, and they do need repairs. We have a lot of green pavement marking. It doesn't last forever. So there does need to be a little bit every year that goes into those things. As we have more RFBs and DFBs, you know, we need to save that money because people have an expectation that, you know, that those will continue to be usable. A little bit about how the program runs, since we haven't talked about it for a little while. We get requests from a pretty wide array of places. You know, residents are a big part of that, but also alders definitely get a lot of requests from alders. As well as staff, we try to work with a lot of different groups. We have someone on all of our neighborhood resource teams in our more underserved areas who are looking for improvements that are needed in those areas. We worked a lot with the community schools, in particular this year, to do some walking audits and to find improvements in those areas. You know, we work with the schools generally to take in feedback. The crossing guards are always a big place that we hear about things near our schools as well. So these are coming from a lot of places. Staff also go to events. At least last year, we went to a lot of events and got requests. Obviously, this year it's a little bit different. We aren't able to get out as much as we were able to, but we're definitely trying to still stay engaged with neighborhoods. So all of these things come in throughout the year, and we have a staff person who keeps a log of all of those, where they're at, what people's concerns are, and who they came from. And then as we kind of get later into the year, we start to look at all of those to see what data we need to collect, to discuss solutions. We have a group of people that also we want to know, okay, if there's a request for some new pavement markings, but then that project, there's a project happening on that street, like a resurfacing the very next year. We definitely want to know about that. If we have requests for bus stop improvements, which are pretty common for the crossings there, we want to work with Metro, make sure there aren't going to be changes at that stop. So we look at all of these things. We have a lot of meetings to go over them. We then start to evaluate potential solutions. We also need to come up with what we think those solutions might cost, so that we can rank the projects and come up with a final list. And then when weather allows, we start implementing and try to get them all done before weather brings everything to a halt. We do have a ranking criteria that is fairly new. I think this might only be our second year with this criteria. We did use the racial equity and social justice tool to help us with this. And you'll see the last part allocates 30 points based on equity, but we also have safety and operation points that are awarded. This is kind of the core evaluation team from a different departments, but I feel like some people are left out of this. Jim Wolfe, who was just here, definitely also helped out, as well as some other Metro staff who Drew Beck and Tim Sabota, who also participated in our meetings over the course of the winter and into the spring to work on these projects. So it is a pretty big team effort to make this happen. And then this is just our list of ones. The website is new this year. We have a website now. It has the project list and a project map that goes with it. And I did put little red arrows at all of the ones that are in our neighborhood resource team areas. They're definitely not the only projects that got equity points, but they're the ones that would have scored the highest in those areas. And I guess at that, just questions and discussion. And I can go back to the list as well, or I could go to the website if you prefer.
Okay, comments or questions for Renee? Harold?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for sharing this. Looks really good. I like the scoring system. Is the scoring data available? Could you share that maybe with the Transportation Commission? I'm just curious, it's nice to see the criteria, but it's nice how it will play out for the different projects.
Sure. I mean, that's definitely something that we could do. I don't have it right at hand right this second.
Yeah, sure. Just would be nice to share that with the commission.
Yeah.
And one specific question, I know in your title slide, and I recently was over there and saw that for the first time, you have the RFB at Bayview, which has these sensors that I think are for people with mobility impairments or mobility devices so that they don't have to push a button. Mm-hmm. Is that right?
That's correct. So that one did come from a request from the neighborhood that they have some people with disabilities that did find pushing that button to be a challenge for them. So these are the first automated ones. But yeah, that's the picture at the bottom left there.
I think that's great. I mean, especially, with COVID, we got rid of a lot of the back buttons. And I mean, we have previously talked about how the RRFBs is their way to use optical detection for people on bikes. So it's good to see that and the new stuff coming around. Okay. Thank you.
Other comments for Renee? Grant, go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, this looks great. Thanks. Is that list comprehensive of all of the requests that were received, or are there other ones that didn't make the cut in there?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is just the 46 projects that we had enough funding to do. There were maybe 65-ish projects that were not funded, so they have been carried over for 2021 consideration, or some of those are ones that would be done with upcoming projects that engineering department has scheduled.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, and maybe if you send out the scoring for these, to send out the ones that didn't make the cut also, that would be helpful to know that they're out there and sort of pending.
And I should, mention, obviously, as soon as we start the review, new ones come in. So I think here, it's down a little bit because we're at less events, but I think we've received about 40 so far to add to that. So
awesome. Thank you.
Renee, did I understand that some of them that aren't being done, are you just waiting until the projects?
Yeah, there are always a few that come in, and then when we look at the project for engineering, they have a project within 1 or 2 years where it would be more cost effective or would sort of obliterate pavement markings, so that we do put it on the project to just do it as a part of a larger project for more efficiency.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. This is very helpful, and I'm saving it for our traffic calming subcommittee. So very, very helpful. Other comments?
Yeah, one thing I want to add is that Renee mentioned of the events that staff went to kind of gather project ideas. We have been focused our resources on the underserved, traditionally underserved neighborhoods. We all know some neighborhoods we got lots of requests from. Those are better connected with us, but other neighborhoods are not. Traditionally, we hear very little feedback from them. So we have been actively making an effort, going to the neighborhood to gather their ideas from them, and we come back and develop projects. So many of the the red line projects are derived from that. Obviously, Renee's right. This year, because many of the events got canceled, so we didn't go to the movies at in the park, or the picnic events, or the White Side festival, things like that. But hopefully, we'll think of ways to gather some ideas from those neighborhoods as well this year.
That's great. Other comments or questions? Okay, seeing none, thank you, Renee. Okay, this is a perfect segue into the traffic calming subcommittee update. I took a look at my notes, and certainly Harold, Grant, and Bill are also on the committee, and Yang and Renee certainly be welcome to bring forward, or Patrick bring forward comments as well. At the last meeting, we focused on refining a draft of the goals. At our next two meetings, we plan to discuss existing programs and work toward a recommendation on how many programs there should be. Should there just be one program so it's less confusing to people, or should we keep it with two programs, or potentially, I don't know if we'd consider more, but we're gonna, basically look at the main components of a successful program and bring forward to the joint TC-TPPB meeting on the 30th, an interim report for discussion by the entire group, looking at the draft goals and the recommendations for the number of programs. So other thoughts from the subcommittee members in terms of where we're at? We've actually made a ton of progress, I think. And I just, again, I want to go back and thank Grant, because that underlying document that you had put together, sort of compiling a lot of the concerns that you had and you had heard from other people, really gave us a good base to start with. So, Renee, did you have anything else?
Yeah, that was pretty good. We've been making good progress going through the goals and things like that for the program. And I think, we had a traffic calming meeting in Alder Foster's district just this week. So I think that'll help to give us sort of a feel for where people are at and thinking about the program.
Sure, great. Grant, go ahead.
Yeah, I was actually just going to mention that as well, and we can share more details out at the subcommittee. But a lot of the feedback that we received, and both Renee and Tom Moore were there. I mean, it really resonated with the discussions that we've had at the subcommittee, both in terms of a lot of questions and concerns from residents around the criteria, and perhaps the current criteria in the NMTP program not capturing their concerns, and then also the concern around looking at kind of more holistically around a number of streets rather than just one street at a time. It just, I think, really reinforced to me that we're on the right track with our conversations there.
Good. Excellent. Chris, go ahead.
Yeah, just wondering if at this point there are best practices, or I guess examples of best practices in other places that you're trying to look at, or just sort of building the local understanding at this point.
I think was it Tom Moore who brought those forward? We got a document that included a number of programs from other places. We haven't talked about them yet, Chris, but we have, that's on our list of things to do. Other feedback? Harold, go ahead. You're on the committee too.
That's excellent timing, because I was going to point out that we did ask Tom and Renee to get us what are other cities doing, and I think we are probably now at the time that we actually should look at that and take away what we can, so that we don't have to reinvent the wheel. I mean, presumably in some cities this stuff is working well, and now that we have a better sense of what our goals are, we can maybe review those other programs under that lens, like what process-wise would contribute to the goals that we have, and where do we maybe do need to invent something new. But we should definitely put that on our list of things to do.
Yep. And that makes sense because we're looking at what makes a successful program, and we certainly can learn from those other ones. Grant, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just thinking, we had mentioned early on about, I think we had asked Patrick to take a look and see if we could get this built into Legistar, and just hearing Chris' question, it kind of reminded me of that. And I think if we did that, it might be helpful for TC and TPPB members to better follow along with everything. So
Patrick, I know he had some feedback from the city in general. Weren't there some guidelines being discussed, Patrick?
Lila had made some comment about that there are a lot of these smaller or short-term committees or bodies that there are some difficulties in getting them into Legistar. So they were going to have a general discussion about if it's possible to get these groups into Legistar, because yeah, there's a lot more stuff to it than just what we may think. So I don't know the status of that yet. I haven't heard anything from the mayor's office about it, but I can get a hold of Lila tomorrow and see if she can give me any updates on if there's any progress.
Yeah, and maybe what you could mention to her is we have a lot of material that is being distributed and aggregated, and I'm saving it on my laptop so that I can try and keep track of all. But it's much easier when there's information like this to track it there. And to Grant's point, other people on the commission and the policy board who are interested can follow along. Because Grant, didn't you haven't there been other people who have asked what's going on and can we see what's going on?
Yeah, and maybe Patrick, if you get a response, if you could forward it to me as well, on the TFOS implementation work group that I'm on. We are working right now to have a staff team that will be looking at board, committee, commission, administrative support and establishing standard practices, et cetera. So I think this is probably another topic that needs to be on the list for that group to consider, to get some standards around when we do or don't create these. So maybe once you hear back from Lila, if you could just forward that on, I can take that back to that group as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
Grant, just to follow up, you had mentioned that group to me and some things that you were working on, and I went into Legistar, I found it, and I could look in there and I could see exactly what you were talking about right there in Legistar. So to your point, it was very easy for me to follow along. So yeah, let us know what you find out, Patrick. Okay, other thoughts about the traffic calming subcommittee? Okay, I think we're making a lot of progress. It's really working very well. In terms of general announcements and other things going on, we had originally received approval from the mayor's office for IT resources for the September meetings, and I just spoke with Lila from the mayor's office this afternoon, and we got confirmed for the meetings for the rest of the year. So, yay. Everything that's on your calendar already from Patrick. So the 2 September meetings on the 16th and the 30th. The 30th will be used for the joint TC-TPPB meeting. I would propose that we put that as an agenda item for our TC meeting next month, because we should have an agenda setting meeting between now and then, and be able to share a draft of the agenda. But I'd like you to think about if there are any topics that you think would be worthwhile to include on the agenda for that meeting where we have both groups together. That would be really helpful. So shoot Patrick and or me an email, and we can certainly have that be considered. We have time constraints, of course, but let us know. And then we have 2 meetings in October, 1 in November and 1 in December. The mayor's office is continuing to work on vacancies. Bill, yours is coming to the council on September 1st for recommending reappointment for your next term. And I haven't heard any news recently, but Yang, I know the mayor's office has been working on it in the last last time we talked. He was continuing to work on that, and will. In terms of agenda items, we moved it's published. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, yeah. Since I'm a co-host now, I couldn't raise my hand anymore. That function is gone too, sorry.
Oh, it is, okay.
Can I take it back to make a couple of announcements?
Sure.
Okay, yeah, so thank you. The first announcement that the ordinance requires the executive secretary position be rotated among some of the DOT division managers every 2 years. So I've been in that role for 2 years now. So we have been discussing to make a transition between me and Justin in the coming meetings. So Justin will be the new executive secretary for the commission starting from the September 30th meeting.
September 30th, did you say, Yang?
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, just want to let everybody know that. I will continue to be involved, obviously. But in staff, Justin will be the staff person. From late September and October. So thank you, Justin, for taking that role. The second maybe is a kind of request. So as we discussed, how can we improve equity and inclusion at the beginning of the meeting. So one of the potential things that Tom and I have been discussing is that maybe we can invite some of the equity expert to come to give the commission and also Transportation Planning Board a presentation on that. So it kind of help to maybe stimulate the thinking within the group. So we've been working on that. We have a few prospects, but not sure whether it's going to work. So if any of you happen to know anyone really good at the equity and governing, please let us Tom or me know, and we can try to make arrangements to make that happen.
That would be excellent timing, and that would be really good because I know there have been discussions at the policy board as well with regard to that, as well as at the commission. So we can maybe talk some more about that at our agenda setting meeting. Okay.
Absolutely.
And we should probably, Patrick, do you want to add Justin to that agenda setting meeting with that transition that's coming up? That would be great. Okay, anybody else have any other announcements? Sorry, I moved off that a little quickly there, I guess. With regard to future agenda items, we moved the scheduling of the Metro Transit.
Grant has something. It's like.
I'm sorry, say again?
Grant and Harold has some.
I see I'm sorry, I see your hand up. Go ahead. Harold, go first, then Grant. Go ahead. Sorry.
Not a problem at all. Just a clarification question on announcement. I think it's great to have an expert presentation. Are you thinking of somebody with local expertise or somebody with transportation expertise broadly, but not specific to Madison? That might help if we want to send in suggestions of who could be doing this.
That is a great question. I think either way is fine. And maybe we can not just do one person, maybe we can invite a series of speakers, to get us more informed and give us more tools to work with. So right now, we're working with some local experts, but not sure whether it's going to work out though. So we're just looking for ideas. So if you know any local candidates or national experts, please let us know. We can try to make it happen. Even if it means maybe even if it has some cost, we may be able to absorb that using our existing budget. So we're working on that.
I mean, panel discussions can be very effective, Yang. So to your point about having a series, I mean, if you had more than one person at the same time, sometimes like our subcommittee brainstorming, having folks there can take the conversation some different places. So all good suggestions. Grant, go ahead.
Thank you. And yeah, just real quickly, I would love to see if we could find somebody that really spoke specifically around equity in transportation. I think that would be really helpful for us. But the reason I raised my hand was just I wanted to thank Yang for his years of service here. We're a tough group. We meet really often, really late, and have a lot of asks to go back and look into this and bring this back. So just really wanted to say thanks to Yang for all his work supporting us.
Yay! Virtual applause, yes. Yeah, that goes without saying, Yang. You know it, and thank you for specifically saying it, Grant. You're going to still be here, so I know you'll still give us that support. But don't scare Justin away by telling him, you know, because I try not to get with you too often. But working with the mayor's office is probably the biggest area of assistance that I've had, because that's, you know, you have that connection, you have the meetings with the mayor, and that's been very helpful. So yes, very much appreciated, Yang. So, but we know you'll still be there to help us going forward, right?
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
thank everyone as well. Yeah, it's been a pleasure. I think we made a lot of progress, and I think this is a really good group. Everybody's so dedicated, open-minded, and I feel like you are really making an impact to the city and helping staff improve operation. So huge thank you for that as well.
Yeah, and thank you, Yang. And I agree with what you said. I've been involved in city boards, committees, and commissions for 35 years, I think, 40 years, a long time, really long time. And this is the most active group, I think, that I've ever been involved with in terms of how much you care and how much time you spend getting ready for meetings and how willing you are to voice your opinions. So, but that does make it a little harder because it sends you off with more work in terms of staff. So thanks to all the commission members as well. So other comments on the announcements? Okay, thanks. In terms of future agenda items, we moved the scheduling of the public hearing up from the 16th to tonight. So we'll take that off the list and we'll add the agenda for the joint TC/TPPB meeting. And certainly we'll see, we may actually have 2 council meetings that we'll know about before the 16th meeting. So there may be some other things that come up. Any other future agenda items that anybody wants to add to the list? No? Okay. Well, if you do come up with something, just shoot an email. So when you see the late items, we didn't put Justin down there as a penalty. As Patrick explained it to me, and it makes great sense with the registration system, people register by the agenda number. So we don't want to mess with those numbers once the agenda is published. So if we do an amendment, that's why it goes way down to the bottom of the numbers. And that's the reason that we placed it where we did. So Justin, why don't you go ahead?
Sure. So this is basically what we talked about back in July when you all approved the system restoration of system service. That we talked about having a public meeting after the fact, since we wouldn't be able to have one before the fact. So I've huddled with staff and we've determined that the October 14th date would be the best for us to hold a public hearing. It gives us about almost 2 months, a little less than 2 months with the service in place so that people can be using it and understanding how it's working or not working for them, while also giving us a little bit of time before we need to post a new pick for our drivers to make some changes. So that's where we settled on thinking that October 14th would be the best date, and are hoping that the TC will agree and allow us to move forward with that.
So if I can just say, Justin, normally when we request a public hearing, I looked back at last year. We knew at that point, Sun Prairie Route, there were several changes that were summarized, and the commission said, okay, this is what's coming down the line. And then as you're going out to the public, you're saying, this is what we're planning to do. What are your thoughts about that? You're looking at this one a little bit differently, aren't you?
Yeah, essentially, we've already made those changes. And so we've already, at least to the folks that have been paying attention, have already communicated those changes. So this would really be an attempt to get feedback on those changes that have already been made, and with the intent of tweaking those changes to meet, whatever concerns that people have.
So comments from the group. I have a couple, but I'll hold them till we hear from everybody else. Chris, go ahead.
Yeah, can you just say that date again? So I can make a note.
October 14th.
Is that all you had, Chris?
Thanks. Yeah.
Okay, Harold?
Yeah, I mean, just one quick comment. I mean, it's difficult to find the right timing for these kinds of things. I mean, I think mid-October seems like a pretty good date because, I mean, purely hypothetical, if the UW changes their approach again, I mean, that will maybe happen relatively quickly after the start of the semester, which then would still potentially give you some time to potentially react to this because, I mean, yeah, the UW does provide a large customer base to the metro system. And so, I'm sure a lot of your considerations were driven by that. And so, yeah, that may change again. And then I guess, yeah, there's not much we can do. And maybe it is well-timed in a way.
Okay, thanks, Harold. Ken?
Justin, the 20%, is that sort of a national standard, or does that depend on where Dane County is as far as its different phases?
Are you talking about the 20 passenger limit?
Yeah.
That's really, so we were trying to follow the Dane County reopening plan. And so if you remember, we actually raised it to 25 at one point, which we considered about 50% of the capacity of the bus, which is in line with the latest step in that reopening plan for most businesses. We got quite a bit of feedback on that it wasn't, that it was too many people. And then with the kind of resurgence of the virus, there was, stepping back from that reopening plan in many, at least for many businesses, not all, but, and so we made the decision to kind of step back a little bit as well and go back to 20. There's no national standard. I don't know, at one point Milwaukee was at 10 as a maximum. I don't know where they are right now. I haven't checked recently. Whereas other agencies don't have any limit at all. They're really just kind of all over the map. And so, but we felt that the 20 is probably a good place for us to be right now to make people feel comfortable as well as be in line with the general reopening plan.
So along those lines, I really think waiting until October 14th, because there's, even if UW actually stays in class until October 1st, and we'll also have other information as far as comfort levels. I mean, buses will get fuller and all that kind of stuff. And I think we need to take that into account when we're figuring out where those buses should be and what the timetable should be. So I think that's, admittedly, it would have been nice if we didn't have the crisis and we didn't have this kind of thing, but I can't see that doing it faster is really helpful because I think we need another month of data.
I agree.
Thanks, Ken. Other comments? We've had extensive discussions, Justin, in the past, and Mick, in terms of how do we go out and get feedback from those folks that are impacted. So this is a little bit different because if you're not going to be bringing forward specific changes, we're asking about the changes that were made. Are you going to go back to the major changes that were implemented in August and head to those areas to connect with the community members just to make sure that we're doing appropriate outreach. I know you always connect with people through the website and provide the notification, but we've talked about doing community outreach, working with the alders and working with neighborhood groups, et cetera, to make sure that we hear from people, even if they don't come to the public hearing, to let us know what's going on. So what are your thoughts about that?
It's a tough balance for sure. There is, in this particular case, obviously our hope is that there's not any like major changes that are requested or that we can actually accommodate. I imagine there will be some requests to, you know, I want to restore this route or that route or that route that we, I mean, frankly, probably won't be able to honor to actually do. But where there are changes, like, you know, for example, one of the pieces of feedback that we've already received on this current network is that, hey, there's the one route, the Route 16 on the far east side doesn't have an early enough trip on it in order for people to get to the hospital by their 6:30 shift time start. And so, you know, I think those are the things we can actually do things about. And we can make those adjustments in advance of the next pick, which would be posted in November. Now, if there are more wholesale changes that this commission wants to look at, like, you know, I know, for example, that several of our comments have been around restoring the Route 38, which kind of runs actually through my neighborhood on the Near East side. You know, that's a bit more challenging, right? Because we don't necessarily have the staff or the budget to implement those routes right now. And so that will be a much more difficult decision. But like I said, I think if it's small tweaks with, you know, adding an early trip, adding a late trip, adjusting trip times, whatever, that's something that we can accommodate relatively quickly once we get that feedback.
Grant, go ahead.
To that end, I think as we're preparing the communication materials about this, I think it might be helpful to just, you know, be transparent about that and, you know, sort of explain, you know, here's our current level of service, you know, here are some of the constraints and why we're looking for feedback, and, you know, without dissuading anybody from giving whatever feedback they have, just trying to be clear about sort of where we're at and our opportunity to, or lack of ability to simply add more service. I mean, I think you have to spend some time with how that's exactly framed, but I think we should try and be clear with the public about where we're at and kind of what the goals of the public hearing are.
I think what I would like to do as well in that hearing is also give people a little bit of an introduction to the route network study. By that time, I would hope that the contract is signed, actually, hopefully within the next couple of weeks here. That contract will be signed and that some of that will start kicking off. I don't anticipate a lot of like public outreach through the end of this year. Perhaps with like the TPPB, some kind of introductory material. But for the most part, the rest of this year will be data collection. And the real public process would get started next year, early next year. But I think this October public hearing will be a good opportunity to kind of introduce that to the general public and let them understand what it is and what the timeline of it is. So that they know that, you know, that's the big opportunity for kind of long-term permanent change.
I agree. I think that's a really good idea as well. Thank you.
Okay, Chris, go ahead.
Yeah, I just have one quick thought about the timing of this. I don't know what the implications are, but it's probably going to be right around the time that some people may or may not have started to make the shift to buses because of the cold. So I don't think that means we should put it off any longer, but I think possibly a lot of people have not started thinking about using the buses that will soon around that time. So just something to keep in mind.
So that's a great point, Chris. So how do we capture feedback from those folks? Will they, I mean, Mick, will they still get the electronic if they ride the bus only in the wintertime? Do they get rider updates throughout the summer, or how does that work?
Yeah, unless they unsubscribe, they'll get, we put out a weekly email with a newsletter talking about everything that's current. We put stuff on our screens at the cab square and transfer points, but yeah, I guess it's hard to capture people like that aren't riding right now. But we'll put an ad in the Wisconsin State Journal. We'll put out a legal notice, and we'll look out some other places that we have enough time. We might even be able to put some ads on the side of the bus to get the word out.
Yeah. So are a lot of, I mean, are we talking to a lot of folks who bike and then switch and don't bike? So is there a way to
maybe through some of the larger employers too could put out word?
We do that. We can. We've been sending out emails to our past partners, our community partners, and our commute card partners. So that covers a lot of employees. So we'll make sure to do that right away.
And can you work with the biking groups? I mean, is that something that might be a possibility for folks who don't always bike and might want to ride the bus, as Chris was talking about? Just another possibility.
Yeah, I can reach out to them. Sure.
Yeah. And are there other comments? Those are all great suggestions. Thinking long term, something Grant said earlier about the parking meters pre-COVID, and hopefully once COVID, we have a vaccine and we're in a maybe not back to normal, but a new normal, whatever you want to call it. If we see revenue increasing, if we can load buses up again, are you thinking that the route network study is going to, that's how you're going to focus on what we'll do post-COVID, Justin?
Yeah, I mean, I really view the route network study as our next big step in the route network. It's going to be difficult for us to, make significant changes to the network, over the next year and a half or 2 years, because, we don't have the staff, and it's really difficult to manage staffing up plus maintaining the new level of cleanliness that's required without a significant budget increase. Which obviously now is not the time to do that, with everything that's going on. So I'm really looking towards 2022 as the year that we implement this new system, whatever that system becomes. And that at that point, hopefully COVID is behind us, or at least mostly behind us. And we can really decide how we want to move forward with the system in the future. Whether that's just kind of our existing budget reallocated in different ways, or if that's the time where we want to allocate more budget. But I think that process will really help us make a kind of clear and informed decision around what the system should be going forward.
Okay, other comments or questions for Justin and Mick? We need a motion. Oh, Grant, go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to share one thing with commissioners from TPPB during our conversations around the RFP for the network redesign work. There was quite a bit of emphasis around really ensuring that we have a robust public participation process with that work. So I just wanted to share that with the commission, that I know that is being understood as a big part of this work. So I think, I'm hopeful that we're going to have a really strong public engagement component to that. So while we might not have another iteration of changes, I think we are expecting that we'll have a good opportunity for people to really weigh in about what their needs are. And then also hopefully a really great opportunity to try and meet those needs.
Great, thanks. All right, we need a motion to approve the public hearing date on October 14th, so Metro can go ahead and provide. Harold?
So moved.
Okay, there's a motion. Bill? Is that a second, Bill? Just wave your hand. Yes, okay, great. So we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Okay, unless we see any raised hands objecting, we'll assume a unanimous consent vote. And I'm happy to see us moving forward with this, Justin. I think it's good timing. Never perfect timing, but we want to get that feedback as quickly as we can. So
Thank you.
So motion carries. Thanks, everybody. So now we need a motion to adjourn, and holy mackerel, it's 7:11. That's not too bad, guys. We're back to our 2 meetings a month. So we have a motion to adjourn.
Moved by Farley.
Okay, Bill's going to make a motion to adjourn. Do we have a second?
Make a motion to adjourn.
Okay, all right.
And tell Joe that we appreciated him celebrating National Dog Day. It was
Yes.
Wasn't my choice.
Mine is very noisy, so she's locked up in the other room. So I'm going to go take her for a walk when we're done here. So, Harold, are you seconding that motion to adjourn?
I am indeed.
All right, excellent. I'm assuming there's no objection to unanimous consent. So I'm going to go celebrate National Dog Day with mine. So you have some very nice looking dogs there, Joe. So thanks, everybody.